Have you ever been sitting there enjoying your cup of coffee in the morning and then your furry little one comes into the room, squats down, sits on your favorite rug, and proceeds to scoot their rear end across the floor? And you sit there wondering, why in the world are you doing that? Let's investigate. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Holmes, and welcome to another episode of Pet Doc Sherlock, where we help people solve the mysteries of pets. And today we're going to talk about something that's not exactly great dinner conversation and might be a little bit gross for some of you, but it's kind of important, especially when it comes to dogs, and that's why do dogs scoot their rear ends across the floor? Why do they lick back there all the time? And usually it's because of one main reason. Some people think that, oh, well, they have worms, and the little worms are kind of crawling around their rear ends, and it makes them uncomfortable, so they lick back there. And that might rarely be true. Oftentimes, if dogs get tapeworms, they'll have little tapeworm segments kind of crawling around their rear end, and it tickles a little bit. The other thought is that sometimes dogs have fleas, and they crawl around back there, makes them itch, and so they scoot across the floor. And sometimes that's true as well. If they have a bunch of fleas, fleas like to live at the base of the tail and around the rear end because it's really warm back there, so they might scoot around for that reason, but that's not the most common reason why dogs will scoot across the floor. Typically it has to do with something called the anal glands, or anal sacs. That sounds really gross, I know, for those who don't know that those things exist, but it's true, and we'll go through what anal glands are, what purpose they serve, and when you think you might need to get those checked out. So what are anal glands? Glands, by definition, is a component of the body that produces some kind of secretion. So you've got sweat glands, you've got mucus glands, and various other things. So anal glands sit near the anus and produce a liquid, an oily, to us, nasty smelling liquid that smells kind of fishy. And they sit at about 4 and 8 o'clock, just underneath the skin adjacent to the rectum and the anus. And they have 2 little outflow tracts that will release that liquid when a dog has a bowel movement. The bowel movement passes through, these squeeze, releasing that nasty smelling substance. But why do dogs have these? Well, it's pretty much how dogs mark their territory. It's why dogs, when they meet each other, will bend over and sniff each other's rear ends. Each dog has a little bit of a different smell, though to us it just always smells gross, and that's why they're there. If you think about skunks, they actually have a modified version of these that they can squeeze with a lot of force, releasing that nasty, rotten egg smell onto your dog or whatever animal has cornered the skunk. So what we can see happen with these is they can become very, very full, and they'll get really inflamed and thick. And when that happens, they can't express as easily. This little outflow tract becomes inflamed as well, and eventually it'll become fairly clogged or even obstructed completely. That's not very comfortable for your dog. So to try to give themselves some relief, they'll start scooting along the ground, pushing on here to try to get that liquid out, and they'll start licking back there to try to push on it to get that liquid out as well. The other thing that we can see with anal glands, and the other reason they might scoot, is anal glands can get masses on them. They can get bumps. And if these bumps get really, really big, they'll also cause this area to get blocked off. Now, there can be 2 different types of masses with the anal glands. One is an adenoma, and the other is an adenocarcinoma. One is benign and not cancerous, and the other one is cancerous. And that's why if your dog's having repeated anal gland problems, it's really important to take them to the vet. We see issues with anal glands primarily in small dogs. And lots of people take their small dogs to the groomer. And the groomers will say, well, I expressed their anal glands, and so pet owners are going, well, why do they have a problem? The groomer told me it was expressed. There's two ways to express anal glands, and most groomers, not all, will kind of feel along the outside of the skin, and if they feel that those anal glands are full, they'll press them from the outside, so they'll just apply some pressure. If they're fairly normal anal glands and a nice thin dog, they might be able to express almost all of that material out. But usually you can't. What we do at a veterinary clinic is we put a glove on, we put some lubrication on the end of our finger, and we take the tip of our finger, insert it just inside the rectum, and actually pinch the anal gland. If you thought vets' lives were just puppies and kittens, this is probably a little bit of a shock to you, but it doesn't hurt the dog that we're inserting our finger in there and squeezing unless it's really inflamed and irritated. The other dogs that will have issues with this are dogs that are significantly overweight, and that's because dogs will deposit a lot of fat around this area, so right through here, over here, in here, and we use this blue just to represent some fat. And as they have a bowel movement, that fecal material will come out and it'll just compress the fat. It won't touch the anal gland, and so the anal gland continues to get full. In small dogs and in big dogs, if that anal gland gets more and more full, more and more inflamed, and that fluid has nowhere to go, it will follow the path of least resistance, and you'll get an anal gland abscess and rupture, and that's really painful for all dogs. And so what will happen is this will get more and more full of fluid, it gets bigger and bigger, and eventually this skin is the weakest, so it'll create a little hole out here for all of that fluid to try to get out of. And you'll see some pus and blood and that nasty, nasty smelling material coming out of this hole. Once that occurs, we definitely need to take a look at the dog as a veterinarian and put them on an anti-inflammatory for the discomfort and a pretty strong antibiotic to make sure that we get rid of that infection. So hopefully that explains why dogs have anal glands in the first place and the most common issues that we see with them. Again, this is the most common reason that we see dogs scooting along the floor. And it's really important for us to determine, is there an infection starting in this gland, or is there any masses associated with this gland? So if you notice your dog scooting, take them to the vet, have them check those anal glands, and talk to them about ways that you can prevent this from happening in the future. For some dogs, adding a little bit of fiber to their diet, like a tablespoon of pumpkin with no spices, or a little bit of green beans into their food, or your vet might give you a amount of Metamucil or something like that that you can give your dog. Sometimes that added fiber will bulk up the stool, and as it passes through, it will squeeze that anal gland more efficiently. Some dogs, especially dachshunds, like the one I have, they just are more prone to anal gland issues, and I have to express his anal glands every so often, unfortunately. I hope this video has been helpful. I hope you've learned something, even though it's not great dinner conversation. If you liked what you saw, hit that like button. If you want to see more from us at Pet Doc Sherlock, hit subscribe, and don't forget to check out our website. As always, remember to keep your pets happy and healthy.